Hello, my name is Marcus, aka Salem Queer, and this is my horror channel. If you are new to this channel, this is all about movie reviews, rankings list, news updates of horror content, and much more in the future. Right now, this is my office space and it's soon to be developed, so kind of echoey, and I'm sorry about that. What I do on here, especially with rankings and movies list, I look at three things of each film, which are the acting, the filmography, and the story writing, and that's how I base my overall grade and opinions on that. So for today, we're going to go into my top 10 list of Amazon Prime horror films. And what I'll do this time around is I'll give like a basic information of what the film is, and then also say what the director, the actors, the subgenre of it, so it just gives you more of an idea. If you want to stay updated and receive a notification, please subscribe to this channel below. Also, I post on my horror channel Instagram page on when I upload a new video as well, and that is Salem Queer, all one word. And let's dive into my top 10 list of Amazon Prime horror films. So number 10, we'll start with Hole in the Ground.
One night, Sarah's young son disappears into the woods behind their rural home. When he returns, he looks the same, but his behavior grows increasingly disturbing. Sarah believes that the boy has returned and may not be her son after all.
And it came out in 2019. It's subgenred as horror thriller, but I would also add in supernatural into it since there's that element piece of possession of it. It was directed by Lee Cronin, which I hope I said that last name correctly, and I looked at his filmography and I didn't recognize any films that I have seen. And it's an A24 studio film, so if you're unaware of A24, they have actually a pretty decorative set of horror film movies, kind of all a little bit different, but when you look at their films, you kind of know the style, like that's an A24 film. And A24 I would consider as one of my favorite studios that of horror. For example, probably I would say it's a good fight between them and Blumhouse. So about Hole in the Ground, what makes it such a great film for me is I like the filmography and I also like the writing of it. It is a little bit slow at moments of it, but overall I just like the look and the sounds that it provides of the horror piece. It just creates the eeriness and creates the uncomfortableness of how like even a crunch sound can make. And the overall acting, I really thought the acting was pretty good, especially with the mother in the movie. Yeah, like she just was very, how I want to say it, believable. Always say likable, but I just liked how it was playing into the psychological piece of it, where she just was always being like gaslighted and also dealing with her grief of death of her loved one. So I just really enjoyed that whole internal battle that she was going with dealing with her grief, and then also her son just like changing over time after he went to this hole and personality change and all, and then she's like having this thing of, this is not my son, someone is taking over him, and I'm trying to tell everyone that this isn't my son, but no one's believing me type of deal. But if I had to compare this movie to something else, it definitely follows the trope of the evil child, but if you have not seen or have seen these other films that I would compare it to, it's like the New Daughter, I believe that's what it's called, and also I would say The Prodigy. But this one is more of a monster, supernatural-ish type of feel. My number 9 spot is going to be The Possession.
A young girl buys an antique box at a yard sale, unaware that inside a collectible lies a malicious ancient spirit. The girl's father teams up with the ex-wife to find a way to end the curse upon their child.
This is a 2012 horror film. It's a genre of horror, thriller, and supernatural again. It was directed by Ole Borndal. I believe that's how you pronounce it. And some well-known actors are in it, a couple actually. If you know Jeffrey Dean, he is known for his work in Supernatural and The Walking Dead too. And Kyra Sedgwick, when I first watched this, I was like, I recognize this lady from something. Then I remember like, oh yeah, I've seen her in the Edge of 17 movie, and that's with Haley Steinfeld, and that's a non-horror film. But she doesn't really have much of a background of horror content or filmography in that way. But the movie is kind of tropey in the sense of possession of an evil demon spirit going into a child. It definitely follows that Exorcist vibes. But what makes it set different is it goes into like the Jewish culture of the demon. It just goes into using like a rabbi for the exorcism, and then you dive into a little bit of the back culture or the backstory of the demon. And that's what I think I like so much about that, is it can still fall into what, if you like that little girl being possessed vibes, but I just like how fresh it takes, and it goes into a different direction of adding a different culture to it, and it does it very well in the sense of not just like very subtle bringing into it. It kind of just like immerses you a little bit more, and I don't know, it just makes you really see like there's more potential into the subgenre itself. Number 8 will be The Midnight Meat Train.
When a struggling photographer meets the owner of a prominent art gallery, he sees the chance to the success that he has been waiting for. Determined to show the darker side of humanity for his debut showing, the photographer crosses paths with the mahogany serial killer who preys on late-night subway commuters. His fascination with the killer pulls him and his lover deep into an evil abyss.
And this is a 2008 film. I would definitely put this as a subgenre as a horror thriller, but if I had to add another one, maybe a slasher involved in there. But it also kind of appears to be maybe supernatural. I don't know. You tell me down below if you've seen this movie, what subgenre would you kind of label this as? And this was directed by Ruhi Kitamura. I, again, hope said that with justice, I'm sorry. And I looked back in his filmography, and I did not recognize any of his films either in there, which I'll probably have to start doing my homework with that. But this film has Bradley Cooper in it, and of course we all know Bradley Cooper from The Avengers, and also, if you did not know, he is in Case 39, which is another horror film with Renee Zellweger in it. But the overall premise of this film, I loved the writing of it. I think it was just like a different type of story that we're seeing and getting introduced into with the horror family or the horror content, horror entertainment world. I was trying to compare this movie to something else, and nothing was coming into mind for me, and that's probably why I like it so much. It's its own thing, it's its own beast. And the filming of it was very kind of sketchy, I'll admit, at some points, and I think it was due to the effects. But with it being a 2008 film, and most early 2000 films kind of were relying a little bit too heavily on the CGI, but this one provided, it is very gory, but it's not Hostel or Saw gory in a way, but it's still pretty gory and still pretty gruesome with the kills, which I thought the kills in general were pretty fun to watch in that way, and nothing like too frightening for me, but for some people I could see that could be an issue. In the acting of Bradley Cooper, I really liked him in this type of role. I actually really like him in horror because he just provides that, that power or that punch to making things feel frightening and very like blown out of your mind shit. My number 7 spot will be The Village.
An Amish-style community lives cut off from the outside world by the woods, in which they believe dangerous creatures exist. They have an uneasy truce with the creatures. If they stay out of the woods, they are left unharmed. When one of the young villagers become ill, the boy who loves her ignores the elders in the village to make a bid to the next town to fetch medicine.
This would be kind of labeled as a thriller, drama, and American Peace Period type of film. This was directed by M. Night Shyamalan. If you have not heard of M. Night, he is very well known for his film of The Sixth Sense and The Signs, and also The Happening, which I hate to mention that one because that one is, in my opinion, not that great of a horror film, but yeah. But this movie is very, very decorated with some very well-known actors and actresses. For example, there's Bryce Howard. She's very known for the Jurassic World right now. And if you also know the movie The Help, where she kind of plays the antagonist in there, and I think she does a really good job playing such an evil role. But also she does a very good job playing a protagonist in a movie too, like this one. We also have Joaquin Phoenix in this, and he is known for his role in The Joker, which I highly recommend that movie for a watch, and The Gladiator. Then we have Adrian Brody. Some people will recognize him by just his face, but they kind of don't remember his name, which is sad. But he is also well known in like King Kong and his scary movie called Splice. And of course we have Sigourney Weaver. She is very well known in the Aliens franchise. And then we have Jesse Eisenberg, and he is known for the Zombieland franchise and the Social Network. And then we have William Hurt, and he is known for AI, artificial intelligence. If you have not heard of that one, that's with Haley Osment in it, and it's about like a robot boy searching for love of a mother. And I was actually kind of hesitant putting this one on my list because there's the controversial that this is not a horror film. And I see why it would be considered non-horror, but I don't know. I think it does have some horror elements of it with the whole keeping people in a society and telling lies and then scaring them with about like there's creatures in the woods and they're gonna get you if you break the rules or walk past the woods. So I just find that terrifying for me because I would just, I don't know, be devastated to find out about what's really the real world. And M. Night Shyamalan, he's really known for his twists of films, and this twist overall, again, is very controversial, very polarizing in the sense of either you hate it or you like it. And I really like the twist in this one because, again, it's just like, oh my god, this movie completely changed the whole feelings and idea of it, and in a good way in my opinion. But I think for some people that may not like it is due to the fact that some I've read said like it lost its power of horror and fright at that point. And I've also seen others say too that how they don't understand how the main protagonist doesn't understand that this is a world that doesn't match or go match against with the Amish community, and like how can she not tell that this is more of a proactive? But I think that's where we kind of lack on placing ourselves in their shoes and think if you grew up in a particular time or way of living, especially if you're disabled and have the disability of being blind, And like, how do you know the difference at that point too? So I don't know. This one is just very, it just, I don't know. I'm kind of interested to see what people say about this one when I put this on my list as number 7. It's probably going to stir some fires, or it's probably going to create some great conversation, and that's what I like about it. Number 6 on my list would be the Amityville Horror 2005 remake.
George Lutz and his wife find a beautiful new house in the small town of Amityville, New York. They think the place is too good to be true. After they move in with their children, they find out that the cheap price tag is thanks to the house's sordid history. The former tenant murdered his family and supposedly being possessed by the devil. Believing the home is haunted, the couple find a priest to help them get rid of the place of evil spirits.
And this one would be labeled as a horror drama genre of a film. And this was directed by Andrew Douglas. Again, I have not seen any of his other films of his background before and after this film. And some well-known actors are in this. Ryan Reynolds, which we know him from Deadpool and many more. And then we also have Melissa George. She is known for 30 Days and Nights. She's also been in some TV shows like Grey's Anatomy, short period of time. Very, very big background of her, and I enjoy her as an actress as well. And we have Chloe Moretz in this as well, and she has a big background of horror. She's well known in the movies like Carrie, Let Me In, and much more. So with this one, I am a sucker for a good remake, honestly, a good remake or reboot if it's done a particular way. So if you watch my previous film or videos, I mentioned how a remake can be done well if they do a type of reimagination or don't have to do it shot for shot or compete to blow the original out of the water and just be its own thing. And I think what made this one successful for me is it didn't try to outbeat the original. I think it was still trying to be respectful of the original, but still did kind of shot for shot or somewhat of a similar flow, but it really just made its own thing, if that makes sense. It's a very, again, 2000s film, but it's a very tasteful early 2000s film, and I really enjoyed how they reimagined the effects and reimagined the storyline, a little bit of the storyline, by having in more of the Native American piece to it of the hauntings and the ghosts and demons. And this was done very successfully, in my opinion. Guilty, I wish there would have been like a part 2 with this storyline. I mean, there are other renditions of this, and it's a whole franchise of itself, let's just be honest. And I really just overall enjoyed the acting. I liked the chemistry between the family and what Ryan Reynolds and Melissa provided on screen. And I will say this, Melissa did or all the time, she always does a great job of having a authentic and genuine chemistry with her co-stars. And also I just love the horror shots of it. It was just so creepy with how they had like the demons pop up in and out, and then using the dark tones of it as well while adding some blood in there too. And it wasn't done over the top gore, which I feel like some gore can kill it, which that's I was afraid with this one. I was like, I could tell they were trying to do something different than like the 1970s versions, but this one it was just like they hit it just right with that. And yeah, number 5 on my list will be the Lazarus Effect.
A team of medical researchers have achieved the impossible. They have found a way to revive the dead. After a successful but unsanctioned experiment of a lifeless animal, they are ready to make their work public. However, when their dean learns of what they have done, he shuts down the project. The team has then killed one of their members during an attempt of recreating the experiment, leading them to test the process on the one dead team member. The team member is revived, and then something evil is within her.
This is a 2015 film. I would label this as a horror, thriller, and supernatural type of film. It was directed by David Gelb, and the actors involved in this was pretty like decorative as well. Now I think about it, there was Olivia Wilde. She's known in the movie called End Time, which I feel like that's such an underrated film itself. And now I think what she's doing, she's producing a lot more movies instead of acting. And then she's also kind of like being a teacher or educating future producers and directors, which I like. Another person in this film is Evan Peters, and he's well known for the American Horror Story. And if you have not seen that show, shame on you. But if you don't like horror, or if you're just new to the horror, he's also well known for the X-Men movies as well. He plays Quicksilver. And also Donald Glover is in this, and he is well known in the Han Solo movie, the Star Wars movie. I honestly have not seen that one, and I am a dead hard Star Wars fan, so please keep my card. But what made this very exciting for me, and I think this is where I really fell in love with this production, is it was produced by Jason Blum, and the production company, the Blumhouse, provided support and funding for this. And that's when I just really realized, like, okay, I'm really liking Blumhouse. And of course, Blumhouse would be a production that doesn't provide like a lot of great movies. It's very mixed bag for me, but sometimes the movies that they do provide, like, it's very cheesy or just like, what's going on? But I think I appreciate that, because it's kind of reminding me of a lot of the horror in the 80s. Like, 80s was very pivotal for horror, and if you look back in the history, and I feel like that's what Blumhouse is kind of trying to doing for the like early 2000s or 2010s, is just making that pivotal moment for horror as well by adding in the cheese, or maybe the not so award winning great films. But anyway, this movie is very polarizing in the sense of reviews and critics. It's either you hate it or you love it. And what I enjoyed about this movie is how it stands out on its own still as a supernatural, but it adds in that sci-fi resurrection piece. But I do see where it kind of falls a little bit crumbly towards the second act, when they are resurrecting and you're trying to guess, like, is this about demons like coming back to life, or is this like the experimental drug that's just creating the evilness? You're still kind of unknown. But I think it just stands out itself, and I really do enjoy the chemistry among the actors. With it's won me over a lot, because it just seemed like it was very authentic and genuine. And I like the shots of it as well. It was very creepy, it was very scary how they did the effects of it. There was some CGI, of course, but it just wasn't like bad CGI. And I just love this one. Maybe it's a guilty pleasure one, but I like it. Number 4 on my list will be 30 Days of Night.
A small town of Alaska experiences a solid month of darkness every year. Though most of the residents head south for the winter, some townspeople remain behind. However, those that stay regret their decision when one year hungry vampires descend on Burrow to feed. Sheriff Eden and his wife and a dwindling band of survivors try to last until dawn breaks over Burrow's month-long twilight.
This is a 2007 film, and I would label this one as a horror thriller movie as well. This was directed by David Slade, and his well-known works for me that stand out was Hard Candy, which is another early 2000s film, and I will talk about that way later in the future. That's another good horror film. If you have not seen it, go watch it now. And again, Melissa George is in this, but also another person that really stands out as an actor, and he kind of does like left the spotlight, which makes me sad because I felt like he was doing such a great job in the horror genre as an actor himself, with Josh Hartnett. And he's well known for Halloween H2O and The Faculty. And then we also have Danny Huston as the main antagonist of this film, and he is well known in a lot of horror films, but what sticks out to me in his role was the Axeman in American Horror Story. So I love this film because, yes, it's another vampire film, and if you're new to this channel and new to, or this is their first time watching this, you'll find out that I do like a good vampire horror film. And I understand that a lot of them are just kind of like the same. It's the whole like someone turns into a vampire and then chasing someone and sucking their blood and, all that. It's the same for this, but this one, I feel like it just stands out and is different because it's all set into the winter cold element, and I don't feel like I see a lot of vampire movies that are like that, and if so, it's more like bigger cities. And this one's set in Alaska, which is just so isolated, so small, and I think that's what makes it even more frightening, is having that isolation piece involved with the vampires. And the looks of the vampire too, way different from most vampire movies we've seen. It's more animalistic. They have their own like just code or language in the sense of just like making sound like animals would. And what also provided like a good score for me for this movie was how the look of it and the storyline of it as well too, because it just kept providing something just new into the frightening piece. Like first we're scared of the element of vampires, and then now the isolation, because it's like where else do you go? And then there's a snowstorm that has it being like nighttime for 30 days straight, which is a real fact in Alaskan culture, which that sounds terrible to me. I need some sunlight in my life. Number 3 spot would be Midsummer.
A couple traveled to Sweden to visit their friend's rural hometown for its fabled Midsummer festival. But what begins as an idyllic retreat quickly turns into an increasingly violent and bizarre competition at the hands of the pagan cult.
And this is a movie that came out in 2019, and I would label this movie as a horror drama. This was directed by Ari Aster, and this was his second debut film. His first one was Hereditary, and this was another, I would say, successful movie, but not as successful as Hereditary, again, in my opinion. And this is another A24 film. Again, like I said, with The Hole in the Ground, you can tell with an A24 film how it has such like beautiful effects, and I'm really happy that Ari Aster and his vision went with them. And a couple of actors in this film that is well known. For one that stood out was Florence Pugh. And really, I remember watching this film and I was thinking like, where have I seen her at? And she's been in a couple films like Little Women that came out in 2019, and she's also in this upcoming film, Black Widow, which I know it's a Marvel action movie, but I do like me some Black Widow. And then Will Poulter is in this. He doesn't have much of a big role in it, but he's in there for a while, and he's well known for We're the Millers and also the Maze Runner franchise. So I am excited to actually talk about this film a little bit. I will do a separate movie review of a full explanation of it in the very near future as well, but real quickly, this one, it's just very frightening in the sense of, one, it's all done in the daylight. I think there's actually maybe 2 or 3 scenes, that's it, most 3, are in the dark. And the rest of the film and everything that happens is in the daylight, which normally in like horror films, a lot of the scariness or the thrills or the suspense is done at night. So for this to be done in the daytime really made it stand out for me in that way. But also how it just provided such beautiful visionary with the flowers and plants and the white like goddess looks. I would say it made it confusing in your feelings like, oh my god, this is such a beautiful place, but then there's some sinister-ish stuff going on behind the world. But at the same time, are you like, is that really sinister? Because this is in Sweden and how they do their way of living and culture in this film. You're thinking like, well, you can't be like, oh, that's terrible, right? But at the same time, how the characters in there that drew in the Americans to come into the culture, that's where I feel like that's the kind of hostile scariness of it. But I just put it out there that this is not fully accurate of the Sweden culture, so don't get confused, don't worry. But I like how Ari just used again another culture and just like made some changes to add some horror into it. And like again, that's how I feel like we can still continue on, bring some freshness and some good impactful horror. My number 2 spot will be Suspiria.
A young American dancer arrives in the 1970s Berlin to audition for a world-renowned Helena Marcos dance company. When she vaults to the role of the lead dancer, the woman she replaces breaks down and accuses the company's female directors of witchcraft. Meanwhile, an inquisitive psychotherapist uncovers dark and sinister secrets as they probe the depths of the studio's hidden underground chambers.
It's a 2018 remake movie. It's directed by Luca Guadagnino. The actors that are involved in this movie is Dakota Johnson. She is well known in her part in Anastasia Steele in 50 Shades of Grey. And they have Tilda Swinton, who are in the Narnia franchise and also has a partake in the Doctor Strange projects as well too. And then Chloe Moretz is also in this movie as well. And what is interesting about this movie particularly is Tilda's role, well, let's say 3 roles. When I first watched this, I didn't realize that Tilda was in this for 3 characters. And then when you rewatch and you look at the credits and you see Tilda's involvement, it's actually pretty interesting to see the different types of characters that Tilda partaked in. And I didn't know at first that Suspiria was a remake. I didn't hear about Suspiria, the original, which was in 1970s. But this one just kind of weird at first. You have to like give it a while. You have to sit down and really digest it after the first watch. And then maybe it'll give you like another 2 or 3 watch. And that's what I kind of like about these types of movies, is that it just allows you to sit with it and just be like, what the hell just happened there? But to give like a general like premises of it, it is done very, very artsy. That's how I would really describe it. The visuals of it's very artistic. I mean, it's a like dance academy, but normally when we think of dance academies, they're bright, beautiful, and comforting. But here is very dark and uncomfortable and not very like polished, to say. It was very cold. And I like how they can just like turn something that's what we perceive as, again, polished to something very dark and sinister. And with this too, I do love a good witch movie story. It's just one of my guilty pleasures right there too. But in this one, I didn't feel like it was very witchy. It was very demonic, but it blended well together in that way, if it makes sense. And that's why I really like this one, just because it wasn't very tropey in either the witch or the demonic. It's just, we're all just saying what the hell just happened in that movie. But Also, and at the same time, we're all saying too, that was like such a damn good horror film that it's something I just will not forget. And like all remakes too, this one did its justice. It was not trying to outdo the original. I think it really was trying to be its own, and again respect the original, because even the original, and I watched the original after this one, and the original is even good even for its time, and I think it aged very well as too. But when you do kind of side by side together, it's very like different films. It's really not done the same shot for shot, and I do appreciate that. And again, that's how you do a reboot, a remake of any type of story. My number one spot would be Hereditary. And
when the matriarch of the Graham family passes away, her daughter and grandchildren begin to unravel cryptic and increasingly terrifying secrets about their ancestry, trying to outrun the sinister fate they have inherited.
This is a 2018 movie. I would label Hereditary definitely as a horror, drama, and supernatural. This is another film that is directed by Ari Aster, and this was actually his first debut film, and wow, did he really crush it with his debut. And one of the actors that really stood out to me in this one was Toni Collette. She is well known for her roles like In Her Shoes, and a horror film that's really well known in the horror community is The Sixth Sense. What I really liked about this film particularly was how, well, let me rewind and let me just be honest. When it first was getting the attention and coming out, I was kind of like against it, because I was thinking, oh, it's one of those popular movies that everyone is just hyping up. And I was just like, no, I'm not going to give it a chance. So it literally took me probably 6 months after it was like released, and I finally gave it a shot, and I was just like, wow, no wonder why everyone was giving it so much hype. I will say this, like, it has that good writing where you think it's going to be one way and it happens to be a completely 180 in a good way. And if I had to give an overall quick review, it would be more of a movie that is, again, kind of artsy, but very, very dark, and it very stands on its own. And I think it's going to create a subgenre of its own self and be more of a pivotal moment for the horror community to see that a possession movie mixed with somewhat of like a cult is going to be the next like big thing, I think, in the 2020s. Look back at 2010s, we see a lot of supernatural, ghost, and I think the 2020s are going to be more branching out to being the cult horror. And Hereditary, I think, is just really providing that good, strong transition into it. And I will admit, even to this day, I only watched it twice, and I think I'm fulfilled for a little bit of just that. And there's that moment in that movie where it really gets to me, and it's literally probably the last 20-30 minutes of it. And I don't know, it sticks with me to this day, and I don't want to get too much details into it for this rankings video, because I would spend too much time wanting to discuss that moment, and I have to give it justice to let it have its own video right there. But yeah, that is my top 10 of Amazon Prime horror movies, and I want you to tell me, what is your top 10 on the Amazon Prime, and what do you think about my list too? Did you like any movies that you've seen on here, or is there any movies that you have not seen? You tell me.